Hello and welcome to ThePrint. Today I'm going to be talking to you about 10 years of Make in India and whether this scheme and the focus that it has placed on the manufacturing sector has pushed the sector to grow faster than other sectors of the economy that have not received the same attention. In short, it hasn't. The sector has certainly grown, but that growth rate has only been about the same as the GDP growth, not faster, despite the focus on manufacturing in the last 10 years. In terms of share in total employment too, the manufacturing sector has not gained. Our exports now make up a smaller share of GDP than they did in 2013-14. The government launched the Make in India initiative on 25th September 2014 to facilitate investment, foster innovation, build best in class infrastructure and make India a hub for manufacturing, design and innovation. On Wednesday, the 10th anniversary of the program, Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to social media to say that Make in India illustrates the collective resolve of 140 crore Indians to make our nation a powerhouse of manufacturing and innovation. The government's own data, however, shows the manufacturing sector has remained flat over the last decade in terms of its contribution to GDP. Data from the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation shows that the manufacturing sector contributed 17.3% to India's GDP in 2013-14, which is a year before the Make in India initiative was launched. This rose to a little more than 18% over the next few years to peak at 18.5% in the post-pandemic year of 2021-22. Since then, however, the sector has seen 2 consecutive years of declining contributions to GDP, to 17.7% in 2022-23 and 17.3% in 2023-24, the same as it was back in 2013-14. In fact, the data for the first quarter of 2024-25 shows that the share of manufacturing has dropped even further to 15.7% in that quarter. So again, the manufacturing sector has certainly grown, but the Make in India focus hasn't meant that it has grown any faster than overall GDP, which is what the expectation was from such a strong government push. In the last few years, the sector has actually been growing slower than GDP. In terms of employment, the RBI's CLEMS database shows that the share of the manufacturing sector in total employment in the country has actually marginally declined from 11.6% in 2013-14 and 2014-15 to 10.6% in 2022-23, which is the latest period for which there is data. So again, what this shows is that while employment in the manufacturing sector has grown, the Make in India push has not resulted in the sector outpacing the other sectors of the economy in terms of employment generation. Apart from employment generation, the other priority area for the Make in India initiative was to boost exports and cut down on imports. The data over the last 10 years shows that the program has failed to do the former, but has been marginally successful in achieving the latter, although even this small success is being reversed recently. That is, India's exports as a share of GDP has fallen from a little more than 25% in 2013-14 to 22.7% in 2023-24. In Q1 of the current financial year, it stands at an even lower 21.8%. Data from the economic survey shows India's share in global exports has grown much slower over the last decade or so as compared to the 2005 to 2015 period. In 2005-6, India contributed 1% to global exports. By 2015-16 or 10 years later, this had grown to 1.6%. That's a 0.6 percentage point increase. However, by 2022-23 and 2023-24, it stood at just 1.8%, which is just a 0.2 percentage point increase. The World Bank, in its latest edition of its India Development Update released earlier this month, made particular mention of India's poor export performance in terms of contributions to GDP, in global value chains and in employment generation. Here's what it said, and I quote, India needs to diversify its exports and increase its participation in global value chains. Over the past decades, despite rapid overall economic growth, India's trade in goods and services has decreased as a percentage of GDP, and India's participation in global value chains has fallen. Exports are also relatively concentrated in goods and services that tend not to be labor intensive. End quote. A major factor behind this decline, the report added, was the high import tariffs India imposes on key inputs used by India's manufacturing sector. These tariffs have raised production costs and made producers less competitive in international markets, it said. Due to these higher tariffs, the data shows that the Make in India initiative has managed to marginally reduce India's dependence on imports, although even this trend has reversed in the last few years. So while imports amounted to 27% of GDP in 2013-14, this fell to 21.2% by the pandemic year of 2020-21. Since then, however, this proportion has been rising again, coming in at 25% in 2023-24, just a little lower than where it was in 2013-14. So, overall, the manufacturing sector has grown over the last decade, there's no doubt about that, but the Make in India push hasn't meant that it has grown any faster than the overall economy, while other sectors like services, which doesn't have the government pushing it so hard, have increased their contributions to GDP over this period. It's time to rejig Make in India so that we can get better outcomes. Also, states need to get on board with land and labor reforms. But on that note, that's all from me. Thank you for watching.